Hello, I'm Joe Walensky, the host of the Digital Accessibility Podcast, The People Behind the Progress. And today I'm speaking with Darren Rowan. Hello, Darren. How are you today?
Hi, Joe. I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, it's very good. It's fairly early for me in my home office in Bellingham, Washington, which is about 80 miles north of Seattle. Where are you talking to us from?
I'm in England, so I'm about 25 miles southwest of London. So the end of my working day, really.
I appreciate you getting involved. It's always great to have international guests to speak with me. And always the best place to start is if you could tell us a little bit about the nature of your work.
Sure. So I lead digital accessibility at Eli Lilly Company, Lilly for short. So we're a global medicines organization. As I said, I'm sat in the UK, but I lead on our strategy and the actual team that we have on that topic. So when I talk about digital accessibility, I usually do it with a framing of our three key strategic pillars, and they are engage, equip, and embed. Because I think it's really important that, first of all, people understand the why behind accessibility. Why is this important? How are people impacted? What are some of the barriers and what a difference it makes to people when you are more proactive around the topic? So the engage aspect when it comes to what my team does is really help to bring that home in terms of both education, sometimes campaigns, sometimes events, etc., workshops, those types of things, where we can get into really deeper discussions around the topic and make people think differently, really, and have a bit of fun with the topic as well. I think the equip piece really is obviously once they've got that um, that sort of passion to ignite themselves to do something about it. So they want to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. Then the equip piece really is where they get their hands on the tools, the techniques, maybe a deeper level of training that relates to their role. So we provide a lot of this internally on our own portal, but also again by sort of tailored sessions with people, enabling people to adopt some of the tools that are available depending on the role that they play as well in their teams. And then the third piece, really embedding, is where the gold is, I suppose, is what we're all striving to do, I guess, is how do you make this thing called accessibility sustainable? How do you ensure it's scalable? And also, how do you ensure that it just becomes part of how people work, right? The business as usual piece. And that is undoubtedly the biggest challenge of all. But I think it's a good and well, great goal to have in mind. And so, again, we do a lot of the work around partnering more closely with teams at that stage where we're really trying to help them think about the different stages through their development life cycle, pointing out where there's real options or opportunities to start to build in accessibility into the way they work, but still being here to help them with, some of the typical, what I might call accessibility specialist tasks, like assessing the digital products that they own and providing some of the input around what they could be doing better in the future.
Well, it's great to hear that your organization has such a clear blueprint of your main mission for accessibility. I'd like to hear more about the things that you're doing at your organization. It would help if we could start just learning a little bit more about you. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you found your way into accessibility?
Sure. So I'm actually registered blind, or as you say in the US, legally blind. I've been so since the age of 18. So I'm in my mid 50s now. So quite a period of time where I've lived with that. I guess most of my life I just got on with things. I went through a period of rehabilitation, re-education, and then got myself back into work as in a sort of professional career. It wasn't related to accessibility at all. Previous job before Lilly was working as a technical consultant, providing support for other companies we were providing services to. And then even moving into Lilly, my focus was continuing doing some of that, started to work more in project management, program management, much bigger types of programs, probably less technical, more started to focus on the business side of things as well. So I really started to learn a lot more about the company in general. And then it was only around about, well, 11 years ago, I suppose, that there was an opportunity, a diversity and inclusion event that we had in the UK, but it was for leaders really across several countries, several parts of the world who came together, and they asked if we would run a session, a couple of colleagues, on disabilities, and I was like more than happy to step up and help plan it, and I shared my personal story and my own experiences, and it was a real eye opener for people as they started to hear the many challenges that you face on a daily basis, right? And go imagine back then there was a lot less stuff that was available to people to make things accessible, like you might have today in the Microsoft tool set, for example. And so, in doing so, what people said at the end of that particular session was, you guys have to create an employee resource group because there wasn't one outside of the US at that time for us. And so myself and a colleague, we created the Enable ERG, as it was called and still is back then. There was a small group of us, about three or four of us, who got round the virtual table and created this ERG. And now there's over 3,000 people in that ERG globally. So it went from strength to strength. And we did that, and we have, I was leading that up until only about 18 months ago. But what I realized a few years in was we created a lot of interest and a lot of awareness around the topic of disability inclusion. But I felt like we should be doing more around taking an active role as a company. And so I proposed to an exec leader when I got the opportunity, when I happened to be in our headquarters in Indianapolis in around about 2018, that we should have a global disability strategy. And so I had this framework that I'd seen from the Business Disability Forum at the time and said, hey, this is what it could look like. What do you think? And I was pleased to say that he agreed that we needed such a strategy. But like any good leader would, he was like, there's a lot on the chart here. So what are you going to do to narrow that down? What's the one thing we should do? So I just said accessibility. So it really was that moment that was pivotal in terms of my own career, and I think in terms of where we went to in Lilly, because I combined my skills as a program manager and the discipline around that, and my passion around disability inclusion, accessibility, into creating this program that we now called Access Lilly. And so the Access Lilly program was launched in 2020, and that includes various work streams like digital, which is the one I own, our built environment, facilities, communications, learning and development, procurement, and human resources. And so I kind of was overseeing that for quite some time until eventually got to the stage where we were saying, hey, we need a digital accessibility team. We can't continue to grow as an organization without putting some dedicated professionals in place. And I was lucky enough to then be able to lead that team. And we've only been around since the start of 2023 as a team. But yeah, we've gone from strength to strength since we, got professionals who, know their stuff around this a lot more than I do, I have to say, because that's not my background. I'm not an ex-web developer or designer. As I said, like I've worked on many IT sort of solutions in the past, but my skill set has been much more about strategy and program management.
Well, I appreciate you providing so much detail about your background and sharing your live life being blind and finding your way into accessibility that way. You know, I you mentioned the work that you'd done in IT before you got into accessibility. I was wondering if you want to talk a little bit about just what that experience was for you personally, having to deal with a lot of technologies, yet having a disability that uh, for a lot of people get blocked in the profession that you chose
Mm.
to enter.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I use today I use Fusion, so the combination of JAWS and Zoom Text, so I can blow stuff up to a very large size, like 12 times magnification if I need to, but I wouldn't be able to read things comfortably at that level. It's almost like a backup if something really isn't accessible. At least I can lean into that and check that piece out. But I rely heavily on screen readers and always have. Um, and of course, you know, back then as I was starting at Lilly or even before then, there was even less thought gone into the accessibility of many of the third party products that I was using. And so you're right, there was so much kind of barriers that you would face on a daily basis that actually you just became sort of accustomed to it, right? And I think that that's one of the big things that I realized when I did get the opportunity to speak up about my experiences, that I got so used to it, and yet the people I was talking to was like, "Well, that's not acceptable," and it was almost a moment where I'm like, "Oh yeah, you're right. That isn't acceptable, right?" That these systems, these things that have been in place, that nobody's really speaking up about it, or nobody else in my mind was speaking up about it in my company. Clearly, there were other people talking in other companies around the world, but I wasn't involved in those kind of conversations, and it suddenly made me realize that I've got responsibility here. I've got some responsibility for myself, first of all, that I need to speak up more and explain to people about some of these barriers, even though they may seem somewhat, you know, insurmountable at the time, because it's like, well, we don't even own this system, for example. So what do we do about it? But I noticed as soon as I did start to explain to people and describe some of these issues, again, I got the same kind of responses. They were like, "But we really should do something about this. We should speak to the vendor. We should speak to these people." Or if it was our own solution, it was like, "Well, thanks for telling me about that. What do you think we could do?" And so it's surprising, really, the amount of time that I'd spent working around issues, finding ways around, working longer hours, maybe at times, just to, and leaning on colleagues at times when you didn't particularly want to, that the moment you speak up is almost like it's a shared problem. And I think that moment to me was the time that I realized, hey, I've not done myself any favors. Not only that, I've not done any favors for the people coming behind me. And so from that point onwards, you couldn't shut me up, really. So that's kind of why I ended up really helping to drive the whole disability inclusion stuff with ERG, and then the accessibility in the program, and I'm where I am today.
Well, yeah, I appreciate you sharing that as well. It's just such a really interesting take to hear you be like honest about what your own feelings were like, which maybe are different from how a lot of other people have thought about it and how it fuels the things that you're doing today. For me, I guess I've I would have been one of the people that would have been saying, well, this wasn't right. Yet you had this perspective, which was, well, you just had to get on with it and
Mm,
and get to where you are today. And so It's a very inspirational story. So yeah, I appreciate you sharing that here.
Yeah, I guess there's part of you, Joe, that, depends on maybe your own background and all those things. But there's part of you that goes, well, I don't want to be standing out as different. People do know the people who work with me knew I use the screen reader and magnification, and there are often people would ask like, "Oh, how does that work?" And I'd more than happily share with them and then tell them, "Well, it doesn't work too well on these things," and what do you do? And like, wow, that must take so much more effort. And I just go, yeah, but that's what you've got to do, right? And that was my attitude towards it. Is like you just got to find a way around it or through it. And the onus always felt it was on me because I hadn't really projected it out further to others. And as I said, as soon as you start to do that, in my opinion, I have very rarely had anybody say to me, "Oh, well, we're not going to do that." Because nobody gets up in the morning and thinks like, "I want to create barriers." Most of these people have no idea these things have been barriers in the first place. And so there's that education piece that's so important. Hence, like the engage bit, right? That's what I found is like when you get people just talking about it, first of all, and feeling they can ask you questions as well, then you bring them on with you. If you just went in there and said, "Oh, we have to do this because there's a compliance reason," it's really not that interesting. Yeah, people will do it, but it's just another chore, another task. Whereas they really feel like they're making a difference to people, that's where you've got them there for the long ride.
Well, now as a leader in your organization and evangelist, what are some of the things that you're excited about looking toward the future, even either in accessibility in general or your organization? Are there any things that you're particularly passionate about or looking forward to as we move into the future?
Well, I think there's probably not a meeting that doesn't go by when we're not talking about AI and how we're using it and adopting it and trying things out. And I do love this sort of experimentation phase that I feel like we're in at the moment. I've just been in discussions today about, hey, what could we do stuff with our PDFs, right? That could be made more accessible by running various sort of prompts, creating projects in Claude and various other AI platforms, and what can we do around that that's just going to not only make them more accessible because we've got a lot of that content like many global organizations have, but also how do you make life easier for those people who want to do the right thing? So it's okay bringing them along the journey, but not everybody can be an accessibility specialist. They've got their own jobs to contend with, and everybody wants to do the right thing, but you want to make it as simple as possible. So my whole kind of thing around the embedding and how do you really shift left with a lot of this really has to come down to how do you provide as much of the capability to them so it's like as easy as possible for them to start to understand if it's how accessible something is and what they can do to make a difference. So I think there's so much more to come because we know the AI stuff is only going to get better. Yes, we caveat that with, we need to check the quality of it. We need to be testing it as we would do with any IT solution, to be fair, to make sure it's consistent, because that's always a problem we find with it. But I do think that there's so much there, and as a blind person, I've been using AI for years. I've been using apps like Seeing AI and Be My Eyes and various other sort of tools like that. And I do actually think that generally, people with disabilities have been early adopters around the use of AI, whether it was captions or what, even, self-driving cars, right? It's like, I think Google's first one, the first driver in there was a blind person or the first passenger. So, we've never been scared to get involved in this stuff. And we're always then asking more questions. Oh, so never satisfied with, oh, that's good. It does this. Can it do this? And asking these questions, right? And Um, the Meta glasses is a great example. I'm a big fan of those. I don't have them on today, but I've actually got two pairs, and I just think the ability to walk around now with wearables like glasses that look pretty cool as well, and that you can get descriptions of things. And, I've been trying them out with signage and helping you to navigate the world, as well as really enjoying the things I love, like listening to music, listening to audiobooks, all in one thing that, just sits on top of your head is amazing. So I think that I'm really excited around how technology is such an enabler for people with disabilities, and I do think it just provides us more opportunities for maybe to to be able to do some of those things that in the past I thought were a real chore, to get done, and yet now I can use AI, for example, to knock out some really nice slides that look pretty much as good as anybody else's. And I think that that's all just, the benefits that I see with the kind of AI, LLMs, and where it's at today. So it's only going to get better in the future.
Well, those are some great insights about AI. Definitely your perspective has given me a lot to think about, and yeah, I'm excited about it as well in terms of the technology. It is great to hear, how you're feeling about that, and it's been just wonderful having a chance to chat with you, meet with you, talk a little bit about your journey. So thanks so much for electing to participate in this podcast.
No problem, Joe. I'm a regular listener, so thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Cheers.